Zettel für die lange Weg. 2 Flaschen Whisky für die Zeit. Und ich dich gern habe, du bist dabei. Maria geht, fahrt mal weg, ist weit. Wann ich geh, ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sehst nicht, was ich mach, du sehst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watsch sehen. Hab kriegt mein Zettel für den langen Weg. Du scheinst da, als mir finden kann. Es hat Maria und Dale ganz wunderbar. Hass ich dir den weißen Dank. Wann ich geh, ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sehst nicht, was ich mach, du sehst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watsch sehen. Well, hello, liebe Leute, gute Abend zu all die Leute dort in cyberspace, die draußen sind. Welcome to everyone out there watching our very first episode of Pennsylvania Dutch Live. We are so excited to bring this hopefully continual monthly program to everybody out there. So a shout out to everyone watching on Facebook or on my YouTube channel. This is our very first episode, so there might be some bugs and glitches tonight. I hope that you can bear with me as I walk through this program. This is the first time I'm using some of the software that is involved in this live stream, so I think I know what I'm doing, but you just never know. You know, as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch, you can plan for everything, but you never know what's going to come up and hit you behind from when you're not ready, right? So we'll just have to roll with everything tonight, but I'm so glad that you joined us. Right now, I'm seeing 44 people watching across the various platforms. That is awesome. And what's really great about this live stream is that if you missed it live, this will be archived on my YouTube channel and on the Facebook page so that you can go back and watch it again, or you can share it with somebody that missed it tonight, or you can watch it as many times as you want. If you fall in love with me tonight in this live stream and with my guest, Patrick Donmoyer, you can drink your coffee tomorrow morning and fall in love with us all over again. That's what we're looking at with the beauty of doing these live streams. And it was a way, you know, I thought about all the ways that I'm doing Pennsylvania Dutch work and people like Patrick and many other people out there. And I just felt my schedule wasn't busy enough that I had to add one more thing for the new year. And I came up with this idea of doing a live stream show. I looked into some, you know, what other people were doing out there outside of Pennsylvania Dutch stuff. And I felt this is one way I can connect with everyone that's interested in learning. And I know from my emails and from the comments on the YouTube channel that there are a lot of people out there that are really interested in our culture, in our language, in our history. They want to reconnect to the culture of their families, of their grandparents, of their parents. Maybe they feel that there's something missing from them. They know they're Pennsylvania Dutch, but they don't really know what that means. What does it mean to be Pennsylvania Dutch? So I'm hoping through the various episodes as the year goes on that we can bring content to all of you out there and help you fill in that void of kind of figuring out what is Pennsylvania Dutch? What does it mean to be Pennsylvania Dutch? How can I be Pennsylvania Dutch? How can I celebrate the culture and the history and the language of my family and of my ancestors? So that's kind of the goal here. And all along, also to entertain you guys. I got a wonderful lineup tonight, and I can't wait to dive in. We have special guest, my dear friend, and a lot of you know his name, Patrick Donmoyer from the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center at Kutztown. He's in the virtual green room, chomping at the bit. He can't wait to get in here and talk to all you guys. We're going to have a conversation about New Year's traditions among the Pennsylvania Dutch. It's January, or as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch, es ist Jänner. Jänner is the Pennsylvania Dutch word for the month of January. And I thought, well, we're starting a new year. How do the Pennsylvania Dutch celebrate New Year's? And what are some of our unique traditions and cultural practices that have been passed down? So Patrick's going to talk a lot about all of these great rich traditions that we have. And then after that, I'm going to throw a song at you guys, and we're going to read a poem together in Pennsylvania Dutch, and then we'll probably be time to say Mach Scoot. But we're not there yet. We got a lot of information to come tonight, and I think without further ado, let's welcome our guest. Patrick Patrick, my dear friend, welcome to PA Dutch Live.
Gross Dank, Doug. This is wunderbar for Dutch Long Sai. Wonderful to be here with you this evening, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Well, when I came up with this idea of I have to have a guest every month, or at least I'm going to try, because, I mean, people enjoy what I do, but you got to look at somebody other than me every once in a while, right? So, and I couldn't think of anybody better to start off than you, my dear friend. Your knowledge, your expertise in all things Pennsylvania Dutch are to be celebrated. And I wanted to bring you on because A, you know a lot of things. B, I love talking to you, and I don't get to do that very often. So for me, it was a win-win situation. I think we're going to bring some quality content to all of the viewers out there. But before Patrick gets going, let me just check. One of the nice things about this live stream is that we can interact with everyone out there watching. If you comment on Facebook or on YouTube, I get a notification right here on my dashboard, and I see we have people watching in Germany. We have people. It's pretty late over there, guys. I'm glad you stayed up for this. We have someone from Belgium that's watching. We have good hello from good old Berks County. Thanks, Jackson. So Carol, welcome. Our good friend Carol Diefenbach-Kantner is watching. Herbert over in Germany. Joanne, we got tons of people watching. Thanks so much, guys. And like I said, if you have comments, please post them. What's really nice is as Patrick and I are having our conversation, if you have a question for Patrick, or something about our conversation, post it, and I can ask him in real time, and we can, hopefully get an answer for you. That'd be, really have it. I really like the idea of us being interactive with you, the audience. That's kind of one of the main reasons I came up with wanting to do this format. So we got Fleetwood now coming in. Oh, good old Fleetwood, pal. I have some stories that happened in Fleetwood, but we'll save those for maybe a future episode. Patrick, real quick, for the people that maybe don't know who you are, and there can't be too many people out there anymore who don't, but there may be some people. Tell us a little bit about, so you are the director of the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center at Kutztown University. And in that role, what are some of your responsibilities there at the center? And also tell our viewers, just real quick, give them the elevator pitch. What is the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center?
Well, the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center is a folk life museum that is dedicated to preserving and celebrating the folk culture, history, and language of the Pennsylvania Dutch. We are really excited to be able to engage the public with traditions that they can bring with them into the home. So we're not just a museum where you get to go and see some wonderful objects, meet some people who are perhaps doing some traditional crafts and things like that at our events, but we especially like to equip the people who come to our museum to participate and to be able to have the culture be something that they don't just see other people do, but something that they can also bring home with them and learn about and perhaps even teach their kids, whether it's Pennsylvania Dutch words, whether it's some of the traditions we'll be talking about tonight, or whether it's any of the different types of aspects of the culture and arts that we really characterize our area and help people to engage in a regional experience. And I'm responsible there for designing the cultural programming, running the publication series, all the public outreach, and pretty much that, and unclogging toilets too. So, there's only two of us there on site, so we work hard and we love what we do, and it's all for the support of the mission to support the culture.
Right. And for anyone right now, COVID, of course, is making things a little difficult to visit. However, in the future, when COVID is gone, the nice thing about the Cultural Heritage Center is that you don't pay a fee to visit it. It's a free visit, I guess we should say. And how many acres is the site?
The site is 33 acres of farmland, and our primary portion of the site is a 19th century classic Pennsylvania Dutch farmstead with an 1814 farmhouse, an 1855 barn, lots of outbuildings, a one-room schoolhouse from the 1850s, a fabulous collection of material culture from the Pennsylvania Dutch, and all of our events are free to the public. So you can come down and enjoy yourself, meet lots of people, talk to people about the culture, and be able to get some great music and food and other types of experiences. We're going to hopefully be having our events again in fall. We're probably not going to be doing much this spring because it's still too up in the air, but we're really looking forward to having people back on our site.
Well, I know there's a lot of people that are looking very forward to get back to your site as well. So our topic tonight, Patrick, it's January, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show. And, among the Pennsylvania Dutch, I think there's one tradition associated with New Year's that almost everybody, and even a lot of people that aren't Pennsylvania Dutch practice, they might not even know where it comes from. And that, of course, would be our traditional meal at New Year's, which is pork and sauerkraut. I know people that aren't Pennsylvania Dutch that they I have to have my pork and sauerkraut. Whenever I ask them, do you know why you eat that? No, we just eat it because that's what you're supposed to do. So let's start with that one. I think that's a softball pitch. Why pork and sauerkraut, Patrick? Where's that come from?
Well, there's a lot of explanations for this, and you're going to talk to some Pennsylvania Dutch people who are going to say, well, exactly what you said. It's what you do. It's what everybody's parents and grandparents and great-grandparents have been doing for generations. No one really knows how long that tradition has been going, because actually this tradition does not exist in exactly the same form in Europe, as you probably know, Doug. People certainly eat pork, they certainly eat sauerkraut, but the idea of specifically eating at New Year's is something that appears to be Pennsylvania Dutch in origin. For instance, in Europe, people used to eat fish. Fish was considered really important. And the reason that these two particular meats, whether it's fish in Europe or pork in Pennsylvania, are eaten is because they're symbolic. That's what a lot of people will say, that the pig roots forward with its snout. You wouldn't want to eat any chicken because the chicken scratches backwards. And as you're moving forward into the new year, the idea is that this is such an auspicious day that it's going to set the tone for the rest of the year. So the things you do on New Year's will have an effect on your life throughout the entire year. So eating pork because the pig roots forward is going to give you a good root or a good slide into the new year, as people would think about it, that you will be ever pressing forward throughout the year. Sauerkraut, of course, is such an important thing for a number of reasons. It's good for your stomach. It's something really important for digestion. It's something that people did not take for granted in the past. There's an old story about how soldiers at the Battle of Gettysburg, when the battle was over and they were asking local people if they had food and provisions, all the Dutchies were asking for sauerkraut. Yeah. And this gave rise to this term, sauerkraut Yankees, referring to the Pennsylvania Dutch. So this is something that's been going on for a long time, this Pennsylvania Dutch affinity for sauerkraut. It's also something that is considered a tonic in the wintertime because fresh vegetables aren't always available. So this is something you can make sure you get your brassicas even in the wintertime when they're no longer growing out in the garden. So the interesting thing as well, when you talk about the pig as being symbolic, so the pig rooting forward, the fish in Europe has an entirely different symbolism associated with it. So if you think about the origins of our calendar as having to do with many, many different cultures, but especially our calendar is rooted in the Roman calendar, the very first month of the Roman calendar was March. What was the sign of the zodiac associated with basically the transition between February and March? But the fish. Yeah. So the fish was what was people were using at New Year's. And believe it or not, the Pennsylvania Dutch used to use fish-shaped molds to make different types of cakes and confections that would then be eaten on New Year's as well, because that symbolism actually carried over here to Pennsylvania. So there's some really cool things about this. And some people even say that the pig goes back to some ancient origins about Celtic mythology of the boar that swallowed the sun at solstice. There's all kinds of different ideas about this. And I don't claim to be knowledgeable about all of that, but I will say, especially with the Pennsylvania Dutch, pork and sauerkraut is the litmus test. If you ask a group of people in public, how many of you are Pennsylvania Dutch? You might get some hands depending on where you are. But if you say, how many of you eat pork and sauerkraut for New Year's, and the entire room raises their hands, some of those people who maybe weren't even thinking about themselves as partaking of Pennsylvania Dutch traditions are doing so without even knowing it.
Sure. Yeah. I want to go back to one comment you made about the calendar. And I think this is something that a lot of people aren't aware of. Can we talk a little bit about how, we haven't always had the same calendar like we think of today?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And believe it or not, the calendar that we currently have, the Julian calendar, was replacing the Gregorian calendar in the 18th century. That transition took place in the early 18th century, and people here in Pennsylvania were affected by this. Imagine this, farmers who've been living by the almanac for generations, using the almanacs to know when to plant, when to harvest, when to butcher, all those important things, recording all these special saints' days and very auspicious days, suddenly are told, actually the calendar's, it's got to get adjusted. People thought it was basically heresy. So folks really thought about this in negative terms. And some of the remnants of this, you can find there's some old tombstones that will actually have the date in both years. So a person will have died and will have the year and a slash mark with the tangential year. So basically, I've seen some of these in Dauphin County. There's also one in Berks County, and it's a fascinating thing to think about that would turn up on a permanent monument. But this is also the origin of certain types of observances like Old Christmas, which people.
Oh, let's talk about that. What's Old Christmas, Patrick?
Old Christmas is actually the night before the Feast of Epiphany. So this was the time that if you look at the adjustment of the calendar, basically it was roughly about 12 days at certain points. At that time of the year especially, it was roughly 12 days. And it led to this belief that, well, technically, since the calendar was adjusted, Old Christmas is on the date moving ahead. So it was because the adjustment was holding back the calendar. Some people also thought about this in relation to several other important agricultural days like St. Abden and Senen's Day. Abden's dog, as people would call it, is somewhat of a pun because Abtun in German means to undo. So anything that you cut down or get rid of at that time of the year, weeds or anything like that, wouldn't come back. But people used to say, well, the day's not right anymore. And people would say this for over a century after the calendar was adjusted because they thought, well, actually, it had to be that original day. So people thought of the calendar as something you didn't mess with. You find this also, especially with the idea of daylight savings time. Doug, do you know the Pennsylvania Dutch words for a daylight savings time and standard time? I'm not trying to quiz you, but
no, you put me on the spot. I'm going to ask you to throw them out there.
Dijfelzeit.
That's right. That's right. Dijfelzeit. Yep.
It's the time for daylight savings time because the adjustment was thought of as being something, akin to heresy. The idea that you would change time, because in folk cultural societies, time and the calendar is a sacred thing, and you don't mess with it. So people used to say that it was Dijfelzeit and Gotteszeit. So God's time was standard time, and Dijfelzeit was the adjustment. Which is, you could just imagine people saying that in the early 20th century when these types of traditions of changing the time for daylight savings time really became well entrenched.
I think we should bring those two terms back in English and start using them instead of daylight savings time and standard time. It's
Don't
God's time right now. Set your clock back to devil's time. It's tonight. Jump ahead. Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people, those are things that you would never learn in school, or unless. And now we're so far removed from that actually happening that it's been lost. Things like that have been lost, of course, over the generations. So we got Old Christmas. We've talked about the calendar change, pork and sauerkraut. You had talked to me a cool tradition that I wasn't aware of because on our farm where I grew up, we didn't have any fruit trees. And you were talking to me not too long ago about a very specific tradition that I didn't grow up with about fruit trees. Let's talk a little bit about that.
This is an interesting thing, and my mentor, Dr. Don Yoder, used to go out into the property where he lived at Roughwood in Devon, and he would wish Happy New Year to all the fruit trees, because the belief was if you didn't do this on New Year's, if you didn't wish them a Happy New Year, that they would not properly blossom and they would not bear fruit. And this is an old belief, and I guarantee that Don Yoder learned this when he spent time living in Higgins as a child during the summer. That's where his aunts lived. He was originally born in Altoona, but his family was from Schuylkill County. And so this is an old tradition that would have been found all throughout southeastern PA, and it takes its roots from both Central Europe and then also from the British Isles, because there are traditions like this in both of them. In the British Isles, I've even heard of traditions where people would gather together as New Year's shooters, just like they would around here, where people shoot in the New Year, but they would do it underneath the fruit tree if it wasn't properly bearing, hoping that in the coming year, that shoot would be kind of a, what shall we say, symbolic of fertility, that it would that it would blossom. And so all this stuff is symbolism, but you'll find parallels to these traditions in both Central Europe as well as in the British Isles, historically speaking. Perhaps not today in these communities, but historically speaking. And I did this year with my daughter. We went outside on New Year's. We had a little walk. We walked over and we wished Happy New Year to all of the fruit trees, the apple tree and the two peach trees, and then to the buckeye tree and a bunch of others that we like to enjoy as well.
Well, I can't wait to hear the report come harvest time if your wishing will bear fruit literally or not.
Absolutely. And we don't eat the Buckeyes, I should just say. For all our viewers out there who just heard that, Buckeyes are poisonous. Please don't
Yeah.
eat them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're good luck though if you carry them in your pocket. If
Well,
you
there
carry
you
a
go.
fresh Buckeye in your pocket, people believe that it would keep you from getting arthritis, and they also believe that if you properly polished it with your nose grease and kept it in your pocket, it would keep you from dying drunk. So
What
if a
more?
person
What
was
more do we need? What more do
I
we
know
need?
if a person
Right?
was having problems with that, it meant you wouldn't do something stupid and end up dead. So there you go.
Yeah, you're too busy rubbing your nose with the Buckeye that you're not that you're not putting the bottle to the mouth, right, or something like that.
Apparently, well, you're supposed to carry it in your pocket. That's also a Southern Appalachian tradition too. So
Okay. Well, these are
that's
all such fascinating stories, of course, and it's so. I think it's so great when we have the opportunity to hear these again, or for a lot of us, hear them for the first time, and maybe it's something that someone's going to say, you know what, that's a cool tradition. I'm going to start doing it, and even though no one in their family ever did it, but now you might walk around and see somebody with a Buckeye in their pocket, and now they can then say, well, this is why I'm doing this, right?
I asked a guy in Germany. I had a Buckeye that I had picked up. It was actually a horse chestnut because Buckeye's
Yeah.
North American. And I asked him, I said, these are our traditions here in PA. And he said, my grandmother told me both of those, that those were things that she knew about.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's
unbelievable.
fascinating. You'll find that in Germany and in Pennsylvania.
You recently wrote an article for the Reading Eagle, our local newspaper in Berks County, about another Pennsylvania Dutch tradition, and that's the idea of leaving three things out. Let's talk about that a little bit.
I love this. The idea of the dry Dinga in
Yep.
Pennsylvania Dutch. So this is a tradition that I had read about, but I also interviewed people from the Burnville area, North Heidelberg Township area, who told me they remembered a time where you would take three things and put them out on your windowsill over New Year's. And the belief was that these three things were supposed to be a portion of something greater, supposed to stand for the whole. They were supposed to be symbolic, and they were supposed to set the stage for three things that you were not going to run out of in the coming year. Three things that you were going to have in abundance, because the belief was that by putting these out on your windowsill, that the atmosphere itself during this time somehow imparted some sense of its importance to those things, whether you want to think about it as a sacred, imparting some sense of sacred blessing, or whether you just want to think about it as good luck or good fortune or whatever. This was something that people used to do in Berks County and all over the region. Now, folks tend to just focus on staples because, we're practical people. So we try to pick things like, many people will put a coin that's supposed to represent money. And you put that coin out there because you don't want to run out of money. Some people will in the past, I knew someone who said they put a little bit of coal on the windowsill because they heated their home with coal and they never wanted to run out of heat. They never wanted to run out of coal. And some people would put out something from the pantry, whether it's flour. Sometimes that was meant to represent food in general.
Yeah.
But then there are other times where people would put very specific things. And I've heard of people putting lard, flour, and salt on the windowsill because you never want to run out of those three things.
Right.
Because you can do a lot with those things in the kitchen. So everybody had their own idea, and each year there's some different things that people will do. I was really fascinated by hearing responses from people after that article about the different things people were putting out. Some people even took pictures and sent them to me. And
I'm going to put you on the spot.
A lovely thing.
What was one of the more what was something that somebody shared with you that really surprised you that they put out, or something that made you go, oh man, that's a really great idea to put out, just out of curiosity?
One person put a piece of pasta out. It was like a macaroni, and I thought, well, that was really interesting. Another person put their cell phone on the windowsill because they didn't want to run out of charge or something like that.
Oh my goodness.
I love that kind of stuff because it shows the way in which people are adapting these traditions and finding meaning in the present day. And it's just like Pennsylvania Dutch music. You don't have to sing about the past. You can sing about the present, and it's still Pennsylvania Dutch music. You don't have to just do things in historic garb. You can look like me and you or whoever and partake in these traditions. So I think it's important that we're willing to adapt these things in ways that make them relevant to what we value in the present day. So that's all important stuff.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you 100%. I think all too often, too many people have this idea that, especially with Pennsylvania Dutch, it's the idea of this old culture, this old story that, and some people do, they'll say, "Oh, that's dead. That's, that was my great grandparents' generation. I'm Pennsylvania Dutch, but I'm not going to do any of this stuff." And I think all too often we forget that exactly what you just said. Any of these traditions, there's nothing stopping us from either continuing them if your parents, your grandparents did it, and even if they didn't, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from starting these traditions again, right? Or just starting them in your family. And if you have children, here's an opportunity to teach your children about these traditions. How easy is it to leave 3 things out on your windowsill on New Year's Eve? And as for a young child to see you doing that and building a tradition and then telling them this is why we're doing this, that's how, well, of course, that's how we're going to carry our traditions on, but it's also a way for you to, and a lot of people, and we've talked about this before, you and I a lot, there's a lot of people that feel that they don't have the connection that they wish they had with our culture, with their heritage. And how simple is it to do some of these things? And you might say to yourself, well, that's okay. Yeah, I'm going to go out and say Happy New Year to my fruit trees. But you're carrying something on that for hundreds and hundreds of years people did, and now you're keeping it alive, and that's what we're doing, of course. And I think that's the beauty of I want people to realize, hey, there's nothing stopping anybody from doing any of this stuff, and just because Patrick's talking about it kind of in the past tense, this is what we did. A lot of people in Pennsylvania Dutch country still do these things. These aren't traditions that are only found in books. They're still alive, and it's up to us to keep it alive, for that next generation and passing it on. Do you want to say anything in regards? I mean, am I just philosophizing here a little bit too much, or?
I totally agree with you. And this has become especially relevant with the pandemic and all the time that people are spending on social media because they're hungry for a connection with others.
Sure.
This year, we started a series of cultural posts on our Facebook through the Heritage Center. And man, it was just astounding to me how much attention we were getting for some of the simplest things, whether it's the blessing of the garden at St. Gertrude's Day, whether it was putting a bowl of milk out for the little hunchbacked man, Esquimalt Menley, whether it was that or collecting the first hailstones of the year, all these different things, and especially things rooted in the calendar. People were just loving that. We did quite a bit, especially relating to the Lenten season, Eastertide, and going into Holy Week. There are traditions for all of those days. And some of these things are very deeply rooted in the Christian calendar. But people don't have to necessarily be Christian in order to observe some of these things, because many of them, like eating dandelions on Maundy Thursday, I mean, that's a wonderful experience, no matter what side of the aisle or what kind of religion you observe or whatever. You can do all these things, and this is something I love too, is that like we live in a time that people keep describing as polarized. And I say describing because I think at the core, we're not as polarized as we like to think that we are sometimes. If we look at the traditions that we hold in common, they cross all lines of political and religious ideas. So these are the things that we can get together about. These are the things that we can share with one another and hold in common and celebrate and find ways of bridging that gap. And so this is an important thing. It's really relevant to what's going on right now in the world. It's really relevant to what we're doing in our homes. And it's something that we can do freely. You don't have to check with someone. Doug, they don't have to check with you or with me.
That's right. That's right.
They just make some pork and sauerkraut on New Year's. They, do these traditions in ways that are respectful. I think that's important. You should be respectful. But I think all these kinds of things are stuff that you can do. You can bring it into your home, and no one has to sanction it. And you don't have to have learned it from a grandparent. You can learn it from a neighbor or a friend. And this is what we know in folk culture is really, really important. You don't just learn traditions from the people who are directly in your family who are older than you. You learn traditions laterally. You learn them from your friends. Just look at any kid. They learn stuff from everybody else. They learn from other kids. They learn from adults. They learn from their grandparents. So we learn from everybody and across all different ways. So whatever you learn, these traditions, partake of them, because they're part of the fabric of our community.
Yeah, and exactly what you said. I mean, all of these traditions have made it to us today because of all of that lateral, translation and transmission. It's like you said, it's not just linear. It's absolutely not. It's entire society bringing it, and as you interact with different people, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there are traditions that I've learned, and I grew up in a pretty traditional in the sense of Pennsylvania Dutch house and the fact that we ate Pennsylvania Dutch food. We celebrated Pennsylvania Dutch traditions. We had the language in the house, through various generations. But I've learned about a lot of traditions that my family didn't carry out that, I've learned from talking to you or interacting with other people in the community around where I grew up. And it's exactly like you said, there's some things that now I practice or traditions that I do that I necessarily didn't do as a kid. But I'm glad that I picked it up. It was something that for whatever reason, the Maidenford family never did, but they were still part of this Pennsylvania Dutch story. And I think that's so cool that I learned these new things that I could bring in and do. And sometimes when I would do that, when my grandparents were still alive, I'd say, hey, I heard about this X tradition that name whatever. And that's when you'd often hear like one of my grandmothers might say, oh, I remember our one neighbor used to do that, on the farm over the road or things like that. We never did it, but yeah, I remember people, talking about that type of stuff. So I agree with you. It is, there's nothing, first off, as I mentioned, there's nothing stopping anybody out there from picking up one of these traditions and just doing it. And like you said, you don't have to be Pennsylvania Dutch to do them. They're cultural traditions. Listen, I'm sure we can all agree that there are tons of non-Pennsylvania Dutch traditions that people do that they don't know where they come from or what culture they necessarily or where they originated in, and they do that and they call it their own. We never, I don't know, we always wear red socks on the 1st of April or something, just make something up, and they might not have no idea, might not have any idea where that comes from, but that shouldn't stop you from trying, doing it and practicing these things. And I'm hoping that through our conversation tonight, Patrick, we at least either reminded people and brought back good memories of maybe things that their grandparents did or that their parents did, or maybe that they still do. Or maybe we help them figure out, well, I've been doing this all my life, but I really had no idea why I did it. I just did it because that's what you do. So I always think it's great to be able to give people some context, well, this is why we do this. Because darn well, they're going to tell somebody else, when they run into somebody down the road, someone might say to them, well, why do you eat pork and sauerkraut? Well, now you can say something more than, well, that's just what you do. Now you can give a little bit of context, and it makes it more, then it's people are like, oh, I get it now. That makes sense why you do that, et cetera, et cetera. So, your knowledge again is, thank you so much, Patrick, we need to have conversations like this. It's so great to bring these old traditions out and let people know that this is part of our story, very much so. That, a lot of times I think too, we fight, you fight the battle, I fight the battle, that, people will pick and choose what they want to say is Pennsylvania Dutch. Oh, it's the language. Oh, it's hex signs. Oh, it's shoe fly pie. And then that's it. And they don't, I think it's important for us to have these conversations to let people know that, well, no, it's not just shoe fly pie. It's not just the Amish. It's not just hex signs. There's this really rich culture here that is very much alive. It's through, and it's as simple as picking up one of these new traditions or just continuing some of these traditions to ensure that it stays alive as as we move forward into the future. So, I mean,
absolutely.
I don't know.
I totally agree with you.
Well, before we say goodbye to Patrick, I'm going to give him the opportunity to talk a little bit about 2021. Now, he already said, with the Cultural Heritage Center, of course, COVID's still at our door. Normally in the spring, they celebrate their Easter on the farm. That will not be happening this year. I don't know. Can you answer? Are you thinking about doing another virtual event like you did Christmas on the Farm and Haymet Fest?
We are. And what we've done for the past two events is that we've recorded a wide variety of different performances, artist studio visits. Of course, you and Chris performed with Broken Spokes. And so we've had a wide range of different activities, and we're going to do that again. We want to focus on some of the things that people do during Easter too, because so far we've done a lot of musical performance lectures, things like that. But we also want to do a little bit more this time around with some stuff that people can not only watch someone do, but something that someone could learn from and maybe also do as well. So we've got some ideas. We don't want to spoil it all.
Right,
At
sure.
Christmas on the Farm, we also touch base on a New Year's tradition, New Year's wishing. And so
Right.
if anybody would like to see an example of a classic Pennsylvania Dutch New Year's wish performed by Mike and Linda Herzog, and then also by Keith Brinsenhoff, you can see both of those with our online Facebook videos that were with the Christmas on the Farm event this year too.
Yep.
So we're going to try to make sure that we include especially all those things in Easter on the Farm that were so interesting to all of our members and friends and participants online last year when we were doing all of our Holy Week posts. So we're going to try to incorporate some of that folklore again.
That's great. And at this point, we still have no idea if, thinking the other events that the Cultural Heritage Center takes part in every year. Of course, the Kutztown Folk Festival every June and July is the big event at this point. We still don't know if the festival will be happening. I will let everybody know on, via my YouTube channel and Facebook when a decision is made. We're still waiting on that. And I understand that's a really tough decision to make. We're talking about a major event that brings in 100,000 people. We're just going to have to wait and see. So, but when the decision's made, I'll let everybody know, especially if it's going to happen, and let everybody know the details and all that. And then hopefully by fall, we'll be in a much better place. And we can then, visit Heimet Fest is another event that the Cultural Heritage Center does, which is a fall festival, fall like homecoming type event. And then, as Patrick mentioned, there's Christmas on the Farm, which would be this December 2021. We'll just have to wait and see how the year progresses. And I will always keep everybody on my social media feeds up to date with upcoming events. But if somebody doesn't live around Berks County, you guys have a website, of course, that they can check out. You want to say that address real quick, if you would?
Sure. It's www.kutztown.edu/PGCHC for Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center. So,
and if you can't remember that, just Google Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage, or just Google Donmoyer, and it'll come up pretty high on the list.
You'll find it. You shouldn't have any trouble. Kutztown University, of course, is our organization. We are a department of Kutztown University. So you go to the Kutztown University website, you'll also be able to find us there.
Patrick, you are a wealth of knowledge, and I thank you for all of the work that you do. I hope my plan is in April, when we have our April episode of this show, to maybe have you back and we can talk about some of those Easter traditions and Holy Week traditions. Those are in my personal opinion, and actually in my practices, I probably carry out more traditional or more Pennsylvania traditions during that time of the year than probably any other time of the year. Honestly, those are the ones that stick with me the most, starting already with Fastnachts right before Ash Wednesday, and then moving into Lent and the traditions that come along with Lent, and then of course moving into Holy Week. So I'd love to have you back on, hopefully in April, and we can have that discussion as well, and inform people about that type of stuff too. So
I accept your invitation, and I would love to come back and talk. And I guarantee we'll have a lot of interesting things to share with our viewers.
Absolutely. Patrick Donmoyer, director of the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center at Kutztown University, a dear friend and a true friend of our culture and our history. Thank you so much for coming on today. Again, you can find him on the internet, of course. Look up the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center has a Facebook page. They have an Instagram account. You can follow all of and they post a lot of really great content. So definitely check them out if you're on those social media platforms. And Patrick's email and all that you can find through the website if you wanted to contact him. They have an archive on site as well for people that are wanting to do research about the Pennsylvania Dutch. So, it's out there. Reach out. He is a good egg, as we would say. So thank you again, Patrick, for coming on PA Dutch Live, and we will absolutely have you back in the future.
All righty. Thank you so much, Doug. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you on this pilot episode, and I look forward to many, many more in the future.
Sounds good. Ja, mach's gut, Bruder.
Ja, du auch. Und schaff nicht zu hart.
Ja, ich tu nicht, du auch nicht.
Probier.
Yeah, okay. What a wonderful wonderful person Patrick is. I cannot stress that enough. I've known Patrick for many years. We've had the pleasure of working together on some projects. I hope to have the pleasure of working on projects with him in the future. He really does know his stuff, and I am being completely sincere that if you want to reach out to the Cultural Heritage Center, if you have a question, if you'd like to visit, drop him an email. He will respond. Trust me. And there are other great people that work there and volunteer at the Cultural Heritage Center. In my opinion, it is probably the best place right now out there to truly learn about the Pennsylvania Dutch story. There are other great places out there too. I don't want to take anything away from other places, but they're in the spotlight tonight. So the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center at Kutztown University, and look them up, follow them on social media. Good stuff. Patrick mentioned the tradition of New Year's wishing, and he mentioned that Mike and Linda Herzog performed the New Year's wish at this year's virtual Christmas on the Farm. When this video is done, I will link a performance of Peter Fritsch doing the traditional New Year's wish on hammer dulcimer. It is the videos on YouTube. I will link that video for everybody to check that out. We didn't talk about New Year's wishing, but it was traditionally you would have local musicians travel from farm to farm, house to house, and on New Year's, around the time of New Year's, they would come in, do a traditional New Year's wish, which would often be chanted. And then they would perform some music for the people there. And then they might have been paid in drink or food, and then they moved on to the next house. It's a tradition that I would love to be able to start up again and go door to door. But of course, it's a little difficult, especially right now. But Mike and Linda Herzog do this at local churches in the Berks County area every year around New Year's. So you can catch them doing it live in December usually. But I will link Peter Fritsch's performance with Mike Herzog in that performance as well, playing banjo, in the comment section after this video is done. So please check that out. Guys, if you like what we're doing here, please feel free. No pressure. Please feel free to support the channel. You have a couple ways of doing that. I have a website I always call it Buy Me a Coffee. I'll link that as well in the show notes. You can support the channel. Any money that you donate will go only to the upgrade of equipment, costs of running the channel, things like that, and also used to bring you more quality Pennsylvania Dutch themed content in the future. One thing I'd also every episode like to do is let everyone know, did you know that we have literature and, Pennsylvania Dutch isn't just a spoken language. We have a rich tradition of authors and poets in our language. And all too often you just don't hear about them because not everybody can read Pennsylvania Dutch. So I made it a goal that in every episode, I'm going to share some piece of Pennsylvania Dutch literature. And I thought tonight we would start off with a poem. It's not too long. I'm taking you back to school, boys and girls. Let me share my screen here. Again, bear with me. This is all kind of new, but I have a very old poem here that I'd like to share with everybody. Hopefully you can see that. So on the left is the poem in Pennsylvania Dutch, and this is a New Year's themed poem by the Reverend and poet H. Horace Romig. And the English is on the right for those of you that don't understand Pennsylvania Dutch or that can't read Pennsylvania Dutch. My plan was I'm just going to read through the Pennsylvania Dutch. So for those of you that never heard Pennsylvania Dutch before, now you'll get to hear a little bit of Pennsylvania Dutch spoken. And of course, if you don't understand what I'm saying, that's perfectly okay. You can look at the English down the right-hand side. So here is this poem by H. Horace Romig for New Year's. Hört die Glocke stimm glor, viel Glück und Lust im neue Jahr, und wunderbare Lieb von Freund, die drei und herzlich glorreich scheint. Wird du in Friede lebe gut, dann geh voran mit frischem Mut, und du was recht, was noch nutzt, und dein Charakter net verschmutzt. Sei net zu gierig, wild und schnell, vor Wasser gut geh an die Quell, und schöpfe dich bis hosch dein Maß, noch geb im Nächste dein Wasserglas. Wann bist noch jung, geh in die Schul, und lern was kannst, sei net ein Fool. Die Lanning ist gewiss viel wert, wär jeder dumm, was wert sein Erd. Bist nimmer jung und Schul vorbei, dann lern daheim und fleißig sei. Die Lanning hält viel heutzutage, wer kenny hat Dreck im Aug. Things to think about for the new year. Again, if you can't understand Pennsylvania Dutch, of course, the English is right there, but it calls on some things that really spoke to me in these times of what we can do as we move forward into the new year. So a shout out to the past. He has passed on, the Reverend H. Horace Romig, and his poem for us tonight. A little bit of Pennsylvania Dutch for you. How's that, people? I promised in my little promo that there would be a song. And for those of you that know me, I'm not going to ever turn up an opportunity to sing, especially on camera. It's just part of who I am. So it is a New Year's themed show. And I thought, well, my goodness, what song would best go with New Year's? I didn't know of any other New Year's themed songs, to be honest. I have a pantheon of Christmas themed songs and Easter songs, but New Year's, there's only one that always comes to mind. And that, of course, is the traditional song Auld Lang Syne. I didn't translate it completely. I looked at a couple different translations that are out there, and I took some of one and some of another, but in the end, I kind of made it sound like something that works well for me and that is singable. And to be honest, Auld Lang Syne is one of my favorite songs to sing in English, so it makes even more sense that I would sing it in Pennsylvania Dutch. So I'm going to share my screen again here, and I'm going to bring up the lyrics that I have pulled from other people as well, as soon as I can find it here. There she is. Dat is sie. Manchmal sind sie versteckelt. Dann muss ich mal finden und rausbringen. Na, verdammt sei. Du ist es. All right. So hopefully everybody can see that. Let me see if I can make this even bigger. How about this way? Then I'll bring that. Na, wo ist es gegangen? Dat ist es. Ah, jammer je. Here we go. And now, so this is Auld Lang Syne, or in Pennsylvania Dutch, Auld Lang Sai, as we would say. So this is the translation that I'm going to perform for you guys right now. And you can sing along, of course. I'm getting out my trusty banjo-lele, because I don't get the opportunity to play this bad boy very often. I thought this is a perfect opportunity to play it. Actually, let me do this too real quick before I minimize this. I'm going to make it look like this. That way you can see me play. Then you can't really see the words. That's better. Littler Doug, bigger words. Sounds about right, gal. Can everybody see that? I hope so. And if you can't, sing along, would you not? Even if you don't understand Pennsylvania Dutch, just sing along. And if someone in your house is asking, what the heck is going on in there? You just tell them to mind their own business until you're done. And then you can teach them this song too. So a little Auld Lang Syne, but in Pennsylvania Dutch. How's that go? So alt Bekanntschaft nimmer mehr bei uns erinnert sein. So alte Freundschaft nimmer mehr bei uns vergesset sei. Ach nee, mein lieber Schatz, für Auld Lang Syne. Na, nimmer mir ein guter Schnaps für Auld Lang Syne. Du ist mein Hand, mein lieber Schatz, gib mir dein Hand, mein Freund. Mir trinke jetzt als noch ein Schnaps zu freilich Auld Lang Syne. Du warst doch immer mehr, mein Freund, glaub mir, ich bin noch dein. Drauf trinke mir zum Schluss ein Schnaps zu freilich Auld Lang Syne. Adieu, leb wohl, mein Schatz, für freilich Auld Lang Syne. Kennt sei zwar unser letzter Schnaps, für freilich Auld Lang Syne. Everybody now! Ach nee, mein lieber Schatz, für Auld Lang Syne. Na, nimmer mir ein guter Schnaps, für Auld Lang Syne. Well, das bist. Oh, jetzt hat mein Hut abgenommen. Oh. Well, there's a song for you in Pennsylvania Dutch for the New Year's. How's that sound? Sans. I was singing about drinking schnapps, but I don't have any schnapps with me right now. That'll be after the show is over. My dear friends, liebe Leid, liebe Brüder und Schwester da draußen im Internetland, my dear brothers and sisters out there in Pennsylvania Dutchland. Well, those guys too, but out there in cyberspace. I'm going to do a quick check of the chat to make sure I didn't miss any questions or comments. I saw a lot of people were, commenting and saying where they were from. That's wonderful. Thanks for joining in, of course. Some people shared some of the traditions that they do it at Christmas, at New Year's time. That's great. So check the chat, of course, after this is over. And like I mentioned before, once we're done, this will get archived. So you can always go back and watch it again, or you can share it with your friends on social media. The plan is once a month, I'm going to bring this new show, PA Dutch Live, to everybody out there in cyberspace. So no matter where you are, you can join in the fun. I don't know when the February episode will air. I'm still trying to plan that out. It's not going to be like tonight was the 14th. It's not going to be every 14th of the month. It's going to depend on who my guest is and their availability, because I really want to have them live so that you have the opportunity to interact with the guest like Patrick tonight. So just keep an eye on my social media feeds for upcoming episodes, but there will be one a month. That's my plan. That's my goal. It was my New Year's resolution, and I think it's a resolution that I can easily keep and one that I want to keep. So for the 80 people watching right now, thank you so much for joining into our very first episode of PA Dutch Live. I had a blast talking about things that I love to talk about. I got to sing for you, read a poem. My goodness, what more could one ask for? You got it, buddy, right? So, like I said, keep an eye on the social media feeds for the future. If you'd like to support the channel, buy me a coffee. I'll have that link down below. Check out the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center at Kutztown University. Check out their social media sites. Check out their website. Learn more. If you want to learn more about Pennsylvania Dutch culture, language, and history, check out my website at padutch101.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow along also on Facebook at the places that I'm on Facebook. I can't even think of all the places right now. PA Dutch 101 for sure is one of them. And I love to interact with everybody out there. Feel free to reach out if you have an idea for a future video or a future guest for this new broadcasting show. That would be awesome as well. But in the meantime, I've been schwätzing for almost 54 minutes, so I think it's time to move along. And I would love to just thank again Patrick Donmoyer for joining us tonight. He really brought such wonderful information for all of us. Maybe you are now able to pick up a new tradition or rekindle an old tradition that maybe your grandparents did or that your parents did, or maybe you're going to pick up a tradition that you didn't know your family did, and you're going to bring it to the 21st century and keeping our Pennsylvania Dutch culture, language, and history alive. My dear friends, please, until the next time I see all of you, take care, stay healthy. Bleib gesund, as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch. That's stay healthy. And remember, we don't say goodbye in Pennsylvania Dutch. We say mach's gut, which means do well. And those are words that I think we all should live by these days. My dear friends, brothers and sisters, Brüder und Schwester, liebe Leid, draußen im Internetland, from my home to yours, I would like to wish you all a wonderful evening, and we'll see you all here next month on PA Dutch Live. But until then, mach's gut.